Hey everyone, I think everybody who's joining is Spiro Portfolio. So hopefully each of you will get a chance to meet each other at some point, because I'm guessing you're joining since you're leading growth at your companies. But for those who I haven't met yet, I'm one of the founding partners at Spiro Ventures, and we're proud investors in all of your companies. We are investing in mission-driven companies that we believe can get to venture scale and are positively changing people's lives for the better. So Craig and I met because one of our portfolio companies, Rush Chicks, and Jill, the founder CEO, recommended Craig to me as one of the best growth people that she has ever worked with. And as I've gotten to know Craig and got to know his work, I was really impressed. He's teaching a growth university, and his NPS score is in the 70s, which is unheard of. Like, if anybody's measuring NPS, that's a really impressive score. So I was like, Craig, let's do something for portfolio, and he is. And at the end, we'll share a little bit about some of the upcoming courses that Craig is teaching as part of launch, one on growth and another on paid acquisition. And I'll send that out to folks. And if you're interested, Spiro will come in and subsidize some of the coursework there. But we'll let Craig speak for himself in terms of his knowledge and what he's got and how he can help us. So I'll kick it off.
Awesome. Thanks, Ha. And this was Ha moves quickly. I was really impressed that you pulled together such an awesome cohort so quickly. This was a conversation that we had, like, what was it? Was it even last week? I don't even know.
Last Friday or something.
Yeah, it was like last Friday. And I was talking to my wife and I was like, yeah, I've got this opportunity to speak to a bunch of founders. She's like, oh, do it. And I was like, yeah, but it's probably, and it was like, boom, it just came together. So I appreciate it. Quick intro about myself. I'm a 6-time founder. I've taken a couple of companies through the Launch Accelerator. I have been through some of the pits of despair and the depths of despair with startup life. And I've also had a couple wins in my day as well. Don't have much hair left, so I'm sure that's not contributing too positively to that side of things. But, over the last couple of years, I really made it my mission to talk to as many founders and growth people as possible, to both try to contextualize kind of what's happening in the industry around growth and growth marketing and product management, and learn from other people, as well as to give back some of the knowledge that I've learned, mostly the hard way, over the last 15 or 20 years or so. Today, what I'm going to do is I cherry picked some content from a 6-week program that I run. So there's a lot of content in this 6-week program. I cherry picked about 15 or 20 slides from that I thought covered at least some of the elements of growth kind of across the entire growth journey that you all are going to be going through. So you're going to see bits and pieces of acquisition and activation and retention and how do you measure product market fit, some of that stuff. I'm going to move really, really quickly. I'm happy to share the slides after. And I could tell you more about the deeper dive programs after. But my goal here is to just go through a whirlwind tour and then mostly spend time on Q&A. And I really appreciate the questions that you all put together. They really got me thinking. And so what I figure we'll do once I get through my material is we will spend about 30 minutes on Q&A. So I'll end my walkthrough at 3:30 my time. So I guess 12:30 your time. I'm on the East Coast right now. And I'm going to just dive in. And so let me share my screen, and we're going to get started here, and I'll present this. Can everybody see okay? Okay. I'm just going to call this the whirlwind tour of growth, kind of the critical stuff edition. And so things that we're going to cover are what I would consider some of the most important components that make up growth. And really, when you think about growth, you really have to think about product road mapping, right? I think that good growth and good product management have more or less coalesced into more of a joint functional role, where the best teams that are going the fastest, some of you probably among them, have figured out that the secret sauce and the magic happens when you put marketing and product together in the same room. And so I like to talk about process and kind of how I, in my longer course, I go through this whole spiel on reasons why startups fail and why a lot of times products or feature ideas don't work. And in my experience, like, more often than not, actually a feature won't work, but they kind of sneak up on you. Like, the features that you put out there sneak up on you in terms of their inability to really move key metrics, either because you're not sure what you're measuring or you're optimistic that whatever you're putting out there really works. And what I found is actually a lot of times the opposite, where you're kind of in the state of constant building and you're putting stuff out there and you think that what it is going to be a game changer. And then you realize later that maybe some retention metric tanked or some activation metric tanked or some other metric along the way just wasn't influenced as heavily as you thought after spending 4 months building the thing that you just built. And so the approach that I generally like to take is that there's 2 streams of work that go into your product roadmap. One is what I would call the core product roadmap. So these are things that you need to build. And the analogy I use a lot is I ran growth at a business travel startup that was founded by the founders of Priceline called Upside Travel. And if we as a business travel startup couldn't support somebody booking a plane ticket, then we had no business. So that was the core of our business. Those were all the things that we knew we had to build. So anything supporting that direct consumer interaction that was pure value and the reason why the startup existed. Everything else, though, was driven from an experiment stream where we thought we had a good idea. We would test that idea often without doing any development at all. Marketing and product and growth would test these stubs of features in the wild, and then they became an actual, a thing, a real thing that lived in the product. But it kind of went through this morphed process where we're using as much of that experimental data and those lessons learned into the core product as not. And what we found was that worked. It works really, really well because you're guessing a lot less at what features are actually going to resonate, and you're not burning a lot of your engineering time building the wrong stuff at the right time, or the wrong stuff at the wrong time for the right person. The next piece is growth modeling. And so I really think that you need a growth model. And so if you don't understand what the most important metrics for your business are, and you're kind of like, oftentimes this is more earlier stage than where you all are at, but if you can't strategically understand what that is, then it's really hard to grow because you're kind of all over the place. And so there's a few components that I think make up a good growth model. One, and when I'm talking about model, I'm looking at forward-looking statements, right? So a model is something that you build based on your best guess or based on whatever data you've got in real time for your product. It's just a model. It's not flawless, but you need to start somewhere. And I would argue that if you get to that point where you're able to form this baseline, then you're going to have smarter growth as you go forward. So a model consists of a cost per unit. So you're selling something. What is that cost per unit? It's number of units sold within a period of time. It's some kind of monthly growth rate that you're looking at, just net new growth. And then for subscriptions, you're going to have total number of active subs, and then you'll have churn per unit of time. With the transactional business model in a marketplace, you also have churn, but you're going to measure it slightly differently. And so what I often will challenge startups to do is build something that looks something similar to this, where you basically have some variables, what you're seeing in the top left. So you've got in this case, this is a subscription model, but a transactional would look very similar, just without the MRR. Some of the unit economics would look different as well, but you've got a cost, you've got a monthly growth rate. So how much do I plan to grow every month? You've got a starting number of subscribers for your model. And then you've got something like a customer acquisition cost or a budget. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to match from a high level. Think about this as like the investor relations level, and something that you're going to give to your growth team and your product team to kind of work from as a framework, right? you want to map that revenue to some kind of budget, and you want to get a sense of, what do I expect month over month? What does healthy growth look like? And you want to model that out for at least a year, ideally 3 years. The farther out you go, the worse you're going to get at predicting where it goes. That's why it's a model, and the model is meant to be updated whenever you get relevant data that changes the model. But this is an exercise that I go through with pretty much every company that I've been a part of or that I work with. And it really helps frame the growth scenario, because it gives you something tangible that you're going after. And then what you can do is you can build these really simple scratch P&Ls. So that, again, this is just a pulse check. Am I on the right track? How much capital am I going to need over the next 6 months to a year to pull off what I think I'm going to do? And again, this becomes a capital play in some ways, because what it lets you do is, at the most simplistic level, just try to match that model, that forward-looking thing, with the money that you're going to need to pull off the execution. So then you start to look at, okay, well, how do I actually go out and think about metrics for my my growth model? What are the things that you're going to look at? So I call this EPAC. So most acquisition campaigns are going to have what I'll call an endpoint acquisition goal, or EPAC. That's the acronym for it. And think of this as that it's probably one metric. It's the handoff between, like, the top of funnel, the acquisition work that you're doing, the ads that you're running, the SEO that you're doing, getting people to your website or downloading your app, and then the product, right? So I like to look at EPAC because it's standard across pretty much any model, and it's standard across any channel that you're working on. And you can compare EPAC from SEO sources or paid sources. And it's basically just a glorified way of saying a conversion rate, but it's a specific thing. So a couple other metrics for top of funnel, what you're going to want to look at are things like views and visits, clicks, and click-through rate. And so why do you look at this stuff? Depending on where you're actually spending time and money marketing, you're going to have, in different channels, are going to have different, and campaigns are going to have different units by which they measure that top of funnel. So like, if you're a native app and you're trying to get app installs, then it's likely the top of funnel metric that you're going to look at for reach to find new customers is, it's probably going to be an impression and a click metric that gets somebody to click over to the App Store, or in the App Store click, and then it's probably going to move down to something like a cost per click, and then you'll have a download metric in that case. So the EPAC or product metrics here would be something like downloads, email captures, free trials, right? Maybe it's demos if you're more of an enterprise SaaS platform. So you bucket these different elements of your model really from top of funnel. So what are my key metrics that I want to track there? And so, for example, how do my top of funnel metrics compare in Facebook versus paid search, right? What are the metrics? What are the unit metrics that I'm able to look at and compare them apples to apples? And then what's that EPAC metric? So what's the cost per download by channel, for example? So those are metrics that I would commonly look at. And then there's going to be a revenue metric. So it's going to be probably new subscribers and or purchases. And then what you do is you move from your model, right, where you're kind of forward looking, to dropping those key elements into this is what I call my simple, it's a sample growth dashboard. And really, this is super simple. Most of you probably have more sophisticated ways that you're tracking stuff. But what I've found is that whatever ownership level you have in your company for who's running growth or who's running the product elements of growth within your organization, is probably a product manager or a growth leader, maybe a marketer. If you have them actually look back and measure these types of specific metrics and force them to manually update this thing every week, it's not just like you're clicking a button in Firebase or clicking a button in Mixpanel and seeing this beautiful report. What I've found is that binding a human to the manual process of having to run this every week forces them to have accountability. And what's going to happen is you're going to start to see trends. So what's highlighted in yellow, these are positive signals that I'm seeing from the top of funnel to the middle of funnel to the bottom of funnel. And what's in red these are detractors. So what's in red on these weeks are things that are happening that you now spot. So you start to spot these issues and these wins or these losses on a weekly unit basis. And you can then either fix what's broken. So like if you look at, column 8 there, I doubled remarketing spend. And then the next week, I had higher subs and lower churn. But the week before, I started Twitter ads. And so when I started Twitter ads in week 7, what happened was it drove traffic that wasn't as good, right? Somebody in your company has to own this, right? Otherwise, you're going to be flying somewhat blindly as the leader in your company trying to set these goals. So I'd strongly recommend something like this that you update manually. And then I would ritualize this. And so what I'll do here is choose an interval to report on. So like I always will look at Monday through Sunday because it's easy and report the prior week's metrics. And I do that religiously every Monday morning. Every Monday morning, I want to see exactly what happened last week. And I'm going to report on the same exact stuff every week to understand what my baselines are and to spot errors really, really, really quickly. And that's the goal for that. Okay, moving a little bit deeper. So this is what I put this flow chart together because so many people ask me, where do I get started with growth and where do I get started in channels? And really it's pretty simple, right? There's this awareness user flow, right? So at the start, you have a user that either is aware that they have a problem or they're not aware that they have a problem. And if they're aware of the problem, right, then they may or may not have a brand in mind that is a solution to that problem, right? So Fluent Forever, when somebody does a search for a translation or learning a new language app, they know that they've got a problem that you need a solution for. And if they've heard of you, then they're probably doing a branded or a direct search, which means that you need to be strong in SEM and SEO. If they're doing a search for the solution, you still need to be strong in SEM or SEO, right? These are intent-based searches. If the user is not aware that a problem exists, right? So most of us in the consumer space have products that consumers might not know that they're looking for a solution. That's when you really have to go to paid social and use influencers and content marketing and things like that. And as you move forward, did they take that intended action? Did they cross the EPAG metric? So site visit or download or whatever. And then did they purchase? And if they didn't, then you go to remarketing and then you start the loop over again. And if you did, then you're finished for now. Right. So I try to frame these things, these like scenarios, more or less into binary units because it's easier to digest. And I can give my team something like this and say, hey, like we're performing really well because customers are searching for the brand, but we have this whole other segment that's not aware that they even have a problem yet. So we now have to build on that awareness building side of things, or brand awareness building side of things. And we're going to use influencers for that, for example. And so how do you then start to uncover what you should be doing? I mean, your friends, the tools here, it's using software like Google Webmaster Tools. Is everybody here using Webmaster Tools to get insights? Not Google Analytics, but Google Webmaster Tools. Okay, if you're not yet, Google Webmaster Tools is it's free. And what you can do, for example, you can run a report on all the searches people did in Google that your site or your product came up with in terms of impressions, and either users did or didn't click on it. So you actually can get a sense of what people are looking for, and they're clicking on it or they're not clicking on it. And then you could take that data, you can download it into a spreadsheet, and you can take those intent-based or those non-intent-based searches. You can segregate, you drop it into SpyFu or SEMrush or Ahrefs or one of those platforms, and it'll give you keyword density and bidding capability, and you can basically down to the unit economic figure out how much money you need to spend to get more users from a particular channel based on keyword, and you can pull much of that stuff through Webmaster Tools. And then there's Facebook Ad Library. Is anybody using Facebook Ad Library to spy on what your competitors are doing? Yeah. So in highly competitive spaces, Facebook Ad Library shows every single ad that any advertiser runs ever. And it's this little known thing. Facebook doesn't like to promote the fact that they've got this, and they did it for transparency. And so if you're in the food delivery space and you want to go in and find out what your competitors are doing, you can go to Facebook Ad Library. It will literally show you the ads that they're running. It won't give you any of the data behind it, but it's a fantastic tool. So my guidance is find your competitor that's doing better than you are or that you aspire to be. And I know we talk about not worrying about competitors, but find the competitor that you aspire to be, go see what they're doing in Facebook. And then your earliest start is you could pick and choose the elements, the best elements of what you see that they're doing and replicate it for yourself and run some experiments and go to market with that, right? It'll save you potentially months and months and months of work testing channels. If you see Freshly doing this, they just got bought. If you see Freshly doing this and you're in the food delivery space, for example, you know that they've gone through years of painstaking detail in running Facebook ads. So you just cut to the chase, use Facebook Ad Library, and you could basically like bridge that gap really, really quickly. Okay, so the activation loop. And so if you want to visualize this stuff, I like to think of, so there's acquisition, top of funnel, all your marketing lives up there. You've got EPAG, which is that transition between marketing and then the product. And then you've got these, what I call next step activation goals. And so these are the linear steps that you want your customers to take. And there's usually 2 or 3 of them. And what they all are supposed to do is move somebody either to the next step or to the end of the process. And that end of the process, let's say it's a sign up or a paid account, that's your end goal. So I call that end goal activation. So when you think about this stuff, you can frame it as a loop. It's a growth loop. So acquisition leads to some kind of EPAG metric, which leads to what's the exact thing I want a user to do right now based on where they're at. What's the thing after that? What's the purchase or the end goal that I've got? And it becomes this loop. So you can have some fun with it, kind of look at that. I use Miro a lot as an example because I think they're one of the best at using both product-led growth and doing a lot of the really hard work to personalize the experience, and they map their onboarding to value and constraints. I'm going to show you what they do. So watch how Miro adds value by getting me into the product really quickly, but not too quickly. They make me do some work. And then I instantly am bumped up against their constraints for their free plan. Watch what they do. So after I've gone and, found out about who Miro is, I click sign up for free, and I get this page. Name, work email, password. I agree, or I can sign up with all these other things. And they already tell me what's included for free. Next step. This is required. I have to set up my team, right? Enter your team name, choose your role in the company. What's your company size? And then they make it easy for me to add anybody from my domain. And then I continue. So team, invite teammates. I can skip this, but again, they're trying to get me to invite teammates. They want me to drop this link into Slack. They want me to just drop emails in. I can invite, I can contact Gmail. Okay, team again. Now what do I want to do? So they're starting to get into the personalization side. And then when I choose one of those, it dumps me into this highly personalized set of actions. So this is their endpoint right here of the things that they want me to do. They have a very strong point of view on what they want me to do. This is what their loop looks like. Acquisition leads to next step 1, which is create one board or invite a teammate. Step 2 is create a second board and a third board. And their end goal is a paid plan. Now, why did they do this, right? So why did they go through this process? It turns out that 3 boards is all I get on their free plan. So if I create 3 boards, I have to start paying if I want another one. What they did there was, by the time I got through onboarding, I created 1 board. because they basically forced me to invite a teammate. That teammate gets an email. They go through the same process. By the way, they're going to invite another teammate. Now they've created 2 boards. That third teammate comes in, they've created 3 boards. Now they're going to start upselling me through value-based offerings on the paid plan. So they instantly leverage those constraints that they've built in through onboarding. I'm bought into this. Like, I'm going through it. I'm inviting people. Oh, turns out like that's all feeding that end goal. And this is why they're one of the fastest growing startups out there, because they've just completely nailed this. And so when you look at optimization tactics, like look at each step of your funnel, right? So look at that whole loop, know what your goals are. And then it's likely you're going to have some low hanging fruit. So pick off the things that you need to do to optimize that full loop. Pick off the lowest effort, highest return. You can use a framework like RICE. Has anybody heard of RICE? It's by Intercom. It basically lets you quantify your effort for building an experiment or a campaign or a feature against the return you think you're going to get from it. I've got my own flavor of that called ICE. And then you can organize your team around either a single focus area, which would be going deep. So like, I want to fix one section of onboarding and just really focus on that because I think I can drive 25% higher conversion rates. Or I go really wide and I might put my whole team on just looking at the funnel, and you might set a crazy goal for your growth team or your product team and say, hey, I want to see a 50% increase in conversion rates over the next 3 months. Go wild on the product, run different experiments and see what happens. And then we'll quickly blow through retention. So retention takes a while to measure, 3 months, probably 6 months more. I like to look at, because it takes a while to measure retention, I like to use what I call proxy metrics to gauge future retention. And so what these are these are shorter term metrics that you use as a proxy to measure how likely a user is to positively impact your core retention metric. So whatever that core retention metric you have is. Okay. So for example, these are proxy metrics for different brands. So for Netflix has figured out that good retention comes from users consuming 19 hours of content per month. For me, it's if I get students consuming 10 lessons, they're hooked. For Zoom, it's to get free users to set up more than 1 call per week for 6 weeks. I'm not inside of Zoom or Netflix, by the way. I know Netflix because they're public, and I haven't looked at Zoom, but last I heard this was one of their proxy metrics. And then for Sandbox, it's getting a letter sent every 2 letters sent in the first week of a user signing up. Why? Because that's the key action in the product that we need for long-term retention. So these are proxy metrics. So when you're running campaigns and you're building features, what's likely to happen is you're not going to just look at retention. You have to look at this step before retention, which is this proxy metric. So you have 1 or 2 of these that you need to figure out. It's before retention. It's not your core retention metric, but it's that activity that users are going to take. And what you can do is you can plot these core actions on a retention curve, right? So this is at product market fit. What I'm seeing in this March cohort is a steep drop off of users over time who stop using the product, but the curve flattens. That means I've gotten to product market fit. If it went straight down and it never stopped and it just crashed at 0, which is how a lot of us start, that's an indicator of not product market fit. So this is one way to look at product market fit, but just know that your activation metrics are things that you can plot on a curve like this, okay? And then you can look at by cohort. So if you've got on the top here, this is number of users subscribing in a month. And at the bottom, these are the number of users retained. It's the same stuff that feeds this chart, right? But it's in tabular format. So you can use these things to start to get a sense of how is performance over time going for my startup. And then you can plot it like this, and you can make all sorts of fancy charts and graphs. But what you want to see is that these activation curves flatten faster, which means if your proxy metric, if your Netflix and your proxy metric is 19 hours of content, you're going to plot time spent per month on the X and Y axes here, right? It's hours spent over an interval of time. And if you're above that 19 threshold, and it doesn't fall off, it doesn't get down to 530. If it gets down to 530, you know that those users are churning out. So again, you plot your activation metrics against this, and it will tell you more or less the strength of your product at that point in time as it relates to retaining customers. You can do the same thing by marketing channel, right? So what we're seeing here is that Google SEM is bringing users in that are much more highly retained. So I'm probably likely to spend a lot more money on that channel compared to Facebook, which looks good for a while and then it just falls off a cliff, right? So there's CAC versus payback window and things like that here. And lastly, LTV. So you take all that data and then you can run an LTV report that looks like this. And again, you've got yellow and red. These are positive and negative signals. You look at LTV over 3 months and at a minimum, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months over time. And you can again start to spot these trends if you're tracking the data correctly. You get a sense of your business. And so this is long term. You can break down in these intervals.